Welcome to the Practical Wealth Show. So today's show is just me and you, and I'm recording this because I've had just a lot of conversations um, of my client conversations start with these two things. So I wanted to address it with a old tool, the Richest Man in Babylon, that I pull a lot of lessons out with. And I just actually taught a class on this to our membership. And so I'm going to title this show Why Most Debt Payoff Plans Fail. Okay, because debt is not the problem. This is going to be entitled the Babylon Debt Money Paydown. All right. And here's the thing. All right. So the where should we start? Let me start with the book because I used to do these workshops around the book, and I would always start out reading the book. The foreword of the book is our prosperity as a nation depends on the personal financial prosperity of each of us as individuals. This book deals with the personal successes of each of us. Success means, it's good to define it, accomplishments as a result of our own efforts and abilities. Proper preparation is the key to our success, and our acts can be no wiser than our thoughts. Our thinking can be no wiser than our understanding. This book cures for lean purses has been termed a guide to financial understanding. That is a purpose to offer those who are ambitious for financial success and insight which will aid them to acquire money, keep money, and to make sure their surpluses earn more money. So if that's you, keep listening. All right. So let's talk about when I say, see, because most people think they have a debt problem, but they don't have a debt problem, you know, or they think debt is the problem, but it's not. It's debt is a symptom of the problem. And so the problem, the real problem is the disorder. See, so one of the things in Nelson's book, see, I have my Nelson Nash Institute hat on. If you're watching the video, is if you don't know the problem, the solution just doesn't matter, right? And so most people don't have a debt problem, they have a cash flow control problem. And that's why most debt payoff plans fail because people throw everything at the debt, they make progress and they're still stay broke. Let that sink in. Why? Because they solve for debt but they never solve for structure. And structure is the key. Okay. And so today I want to walk you through one of the most practical wealth lessons ever written, buried inside of a 5,000-year-old story from the richest man in Babylon, and how to eliminate debt without staying broke. All right. So here's the thing. Most debt advice is incomplete because here's what it tells you. So you talk about budgeting. Budgeting is scarcity based. Um, you know, here's what we get. So here's the advice you get. Cut expenses. So that's scarcity. Okay, you can't shrink your way to wealth, as Gary Gardner always say. Pay extra, which means you've prioritized the institution's balance sheet over your own. Snowball the balances, but you don't snowball right because you throw it off across all your debt instead of picking one debt at a time. They, get intense, suffer for 18 months. All right. So, it's suffering. So what's the problem? That advice only focuses on debt, right? And so it ignores cash flow, it ignores savings, it ignores liquidity, it ignores margin, it ignores behavior. So what happens? As a result of that, people pay off their debt, but then they go right big. back into debt because you focus on paying off debt and something else comes up, which is called life, and you haven't saved up any money or you haven't built your private bank or your private reserve system, you only option you have is to go back and borrow money, use third party capital, right? Because what is debt? You've spend money you have not yet earned. You've used future earnings as collateral. So you got to go back, use future earnings as collateral. They'll loan you the money if your credit's good. Now you got to pay back the money with interest, right? So you solve for the payment, but you didn't solve the problem, okay? And so that is the problem. So if paying off debt was enough, people would only need to do it once. Let me repeat that. If paying off debt was the problem, you'd only need to do it once. What people do is they use these debt things that ruin your credit. They do debt consolidation loans that I've, not rebalancing, what's it called? Where if you don't solve the root problem, which is cash flow, you might have put a band-aid and give yourself temporary relief. But since you haven't changed the behavior that caused it in the first place, because it's not a money problem, okay? You all make enough money, but you tend to want more than what you make will allow and structure. And the people I'm talking to on this, that's what y'all do. I'm not, this is for you if you're you know making a little bit of money, you know and so because I'm not a social worker, right? So I hate to say it, right? So here's the real lesson from the Babylon book. So the name of the principal character in the book is Dabashir, right? So the in the Richest Man in Babylon, what I'm going to go over specifically, there's a chapter called The Clay Tablets from Babylon. So most people read this as a debt payoff chapter, but it's not, okay? It is a cash flow control chapter disguised as a short debt payoff story. So the character Dabashir wrecked his finances. He borrowed too much. He spent without discipline. He avoided obligations. He lost control of his money. Does that sound familiar? And so the problem wasn't debt, the problem was disorder. So what fixed it? A plan, right? And the plan was simple. And so I heard people call it the perpetual wealth rule. I call it the 10-20-70, or actually 10-70-20. So 10%, because the first lesson in the book is part of all you earn is yours to keep. So people will call me and, oh, I got to get out of debt. I want to improve my credit, in our first meeting, just to kind of see if, we're a good fit to work together. So on our site, you get a funny, I have two things, a strategy session and a financial GPS session, which we go into a little more detail. Uh, but the formula is, and this is what I analyze. Are you saving, right? So in the book is 10%. Part of all you earn is yours to keep. That's step one. So people say, well, what's your first goal? I want to get out of debt. Well, what's the first bill you need to pay? Crickets. They don't, right? Part of all you earn is yours to keep, right? And so otherwise you're focusing on the institution's balance sheet. And guess why you're doing that? Because that's what you've been taught, right? So I call this a wealth transfer. So we're all involved in transferring our wealth. Transfer means going from your checking account to someone else's, to people that create the situations, control the outcomes so that they profit because you don't understand the game. Think about tic-tac-toe. When you first either were teaching it to, let's say, one of your young siblings or cousins or something like that, or friends, and they haven't played before, who won? You done, because you knew where to start, and you know then you work up to where it's a tie, and then it's hard to play. Same thing with things like Connect Four, right? So it's hard to win a game you don't know the rules. And so with money we're learning enough to play the game, but the play the game creates transfers of our wealth to other people. So you have to get control. So here's the plan. Real simple. So get out a sheet of paper and uh I did this on a calculator. I don't have it handy, but the so let's say 10% you keep. You've got to look at your expenses and say, okay, I've got 70% I'm going to live on, and I'm going to use 20% of my income to attack the debt. No more, no less. And I'm paying myself first. So let's say you had write this out, 5,000, let's say you're netting $5,000 a month. Doesn't matter what you make, the percentages are the same, right? So if you are doing that, well, 10% of 5,000, I'm going on net. Usually I do gross, but I'm just going to keep it simple because if you're, let's say, an employee and you're hearing this, you live in a net world, right? And there are things to improve the net. That's another conversation. That's kind of what we do. But let's say 5,000. So you subtract 10%, that's 500. So now you got 4,500 to deal with your life. So 70% of that is 3,500. So that's your lifestyle money, and 20% is going to be allocated towards debt pay down. And once that debt is gone, that's 20% that you've recaptured in your cash flow that could go towards wealth building or enjoying your life more, really both. Okay. And because in saving, because you we teach a strategy called debt to capital. See, you want to get out of debt and stay out of debt by making sure that you're saving and getting out of debt simultaneously, because if you have money, there's no reason to go back into debt. Okay. So you've got to decide, I got to do this. And here's a little other caveat. You didn't get into it overnight, so you're not going to get out of it overnight. So it took you 3, 4, 5, 10 years to get it. So don't try to get rid of it in 6 months, because you just take a bunch of stupid shortcuts. You end up in a worse place than you were before. All right. And so the most important line in this chapter is, it was the plan that made his success. Not luck, not, oh, I got to make more money, not a windfall, uh, a plan, right? That's is still true today. So here's the thing. Why does this work? Because it does three things at once. It builds liquidity, right? Part of all your earnings yours to keep, liquidity, savings. It controls lifestyle, because you have to, we don't like budgeting because it's looking at history, but I'm going to say right now, you have to manage a budget surplus. You have to pay yourself first. So it builds liquidity because you've managed a budget surplus. It controls lifestyle, and it eliminates debt all at once. Okay. And so most people send everything to their creditors. All that does is enrich the financial institutions, which is what they want from you, right? And so when you do that, you're making them stronger. So, the just remember this, what's good for the bank is bad for you. Okay. And so that makes the bank stronger, not you, right? And so what happens is, if you cannot become financially free by only improving the bank's balance sheet, right? The third lesson in Rich Dad Poor Dad, one of these ask people also, when's the last three books you read on finances? And y'all don't read enough. You work for money. To me, it just makes common sense to figure out how money works, since you're spending, most of your working week working for it, and you have disdain for it. So you cannot get what you disdain, right? So money is not the root of all evil. It's the love of money, but you need money to live. So I just want to say again, you cannot become financially free by only improving the bank's balance sheet. And so what I love about Rich Dad Poor Dad is basically a book about accounting. So if you can say, all right, I got assets, what's an asset? Someone puts money in my pocket. I got liabilities. was a liability, something that takes money out of your pocket. Everything that is a liability or debt is somebody else's asset. So you've got to decide who's more important, right? So again, debt is not the disease. Debt is a disorder of the disease. Cash flow structure. So if you look, if you're watching, looking behind me, our cash flow map, that's the cure. All right. So now let me translate the lesson into our Money for Life blueprint. So if you go to moneyforlife.net, you click Money for Life Blueprint. I'm just going to go over. So step one is cash flow control, which is finding wealth transfers and creating a system for cash flow control, not a budget, right? And step two is be the bank. Step three is maximum protection. Step four is legacy. Right now, I'm just talking about step one, find the money and becoming more efficient. So control is, in my world, debt is not the payoff. That's not the goal, right? My goal is freedom from debt to others, right? So you be the bank and you control the debt, and you're going to still need to use other people's money. The key is keeping that money in your personal economy. So cash flow control is step one, not debt payoff. And so before we talk about investing, before we talk about becoming your own banker, before we talk about wealth creation, multi-generational wealth, we have to answer one. How many questions? One question. Where does your money go now? Because if you not cannot control cash flow, nothing else works. If you can't control your cash flow, somebody will always control you. So the key is, and here's a that's the upcoming title of a forthcoming book. Where's my money going? Where did my money go? Right? Because you cannot control cash flow, somebody always control you. Remember that, okay? And so that's why this lesson is tied directly in our Money for Life step one. Pay yourself first, control lifestyle. We're going to redirect debt. We're going to rebuild margin. We're going to restore dignity, okay? So that you're getting out of debt and you're building wealth so you don't, or not building wealth, building liquidity, which you got to do that before you can start working on wealth. There's an order to this stuff, guys. And so, and then that's the sequence. That is the work, right? And that's how you stop debt from controlling your life, from stressing you out. Okay. So think about this. If you're in debt, your goal is not just get out of debt. Your goal is to restore order. Debt is not the problem. Disorder is your problem. So that's why we got to fix that first. Once you fix the structure, the debt becomes manageable. That's how you rebuild wealth. That's how you rebuild confidence, peace of mind, and a semblance of control. So you have a semblance of control, your peace of mind goes up. And so you got to rebuild control first. And so that's our goal. And so if you want help with that, I built a worksheet around this called the Babylon Debt Paydown Method, and that walks you through how to map your cash flow, organize your debt, and build a real paydown strategy. So if you like that, there'll be a link uh, to it or to an assessment in the show notes. And this is where financial freedom actually starts. Like this is the work. And so this is your start. So if that's it, and I would probably dare say 85, 90% of my people when they come to me, and I'm talking about anywhere from 80 to a $250,000 a year, their first thing they say, all right, I don't know where my money goes. And we've got this debt, we've got this student loan debt, I've got business owners with bad debt. You gotta get control of that. And that's where the game begins. You have to tell your money where to go instead of asking where it went. First, and that's where financial freedom actually starts. So I hope this was helpful today. Uh, Check out this intrigues you, you know, go to the show notes and look for the link to the little worksheet we're going to give away. Go to practicalwealth.net and uh, request, you can actually set up a financial freedom session, and we'd love to talk to you soon. Have a great day.